A goal, Chris Billy, Huddersfield Town. The most famous goal of Chris Billy's life.
Is this the moment for Lee Fowler? It is. Take your place in Division 2, Huddersfield Town.
Ruby and Steve Simonson's boots now. He's missed. Steve Simonson clears the frame of the goal and collapses in a heap of tears. Huddersfield Town are promoted.
Mustafa Schindler has a chance to write his name in Huddersfield Town legend. And he takes that chance!
Hello and welcome to The Drive-In, the Carlos Puyal, or Ian Kilroy, of centre-backs because of how short but impactful they are. This week, myself and Killer will mostly be talking about Exeter City at home. Town are looking to make it 3 home wins on the spin, but standing in front of them is an Exeter City side who sits 6th in the table and were unbeaten in 6 games until they lost 2-1 at Reading last time out. But what of the Grecians? Did they get the nickname from colouring their salt and pepper coloured hair? Let's dig in. Killer. Exeter City were founded in 1901 as St Sidwell's United, who then merged with the other local football team, Exeter United, and they played in the Southern League until 1920 when they were absorbed into the newly created 3rd tier of English football. It did, however, take them 60 years to achieve their first ever promotion when they finished 4th in the old Division 4 in 1964. Some Town fans think they're hard done by not seeing a promotion. Exeter have never played in the top 2 divisions of English football. The only title they've ever won was in 1990 when they won the old Division 4 under Terry Cooper, the ex-Birmingham City manager. So, did you know, Killer, they are the first team to ever play the Brazil national team in 1914. And they celebrated that fact 100 years later when they went back to Brazil and played Fluminense. Did you know as well, Killer? In 1726, this is going way back now. In 1726, during a fair in Southernhay in Exeter, the War of Troy was reenacted. The residents of the inner wall played as the Trojans, while residents who lived in the outermost parts of the walls were the Greeks. The Greeks were the residents of Sidwell, which is where the football club was founded. Apparently, the Greek Orthodox community had a huge population in those days. After a couple of reenactments, the people of Sidwell started referring to themselves as the Grecians. Therefore, when a football ground was opened at that end of the city wall, it was given the name of the Grecian Gate, and the players who started playing at that ground were then known as the Grecians. So there you go, Killer. It's nothing to do with a certain hair dye that me and you may need, and it's all to do with the Greeks. And there are a few rumours that they were called that because they played like Greek gods, but there we go. So how have the Greek gods fared against the Terriers? So Huddersfield Town versus Exeter. The first ever meeting was in December 1975 during Town's great decline from the top flight. Sound familiar? Exeter won 1-0 at Leeds Road and in fact won the first 4 league meetings between the sides. Town would only lose 1 of the next 12 and have won 11 games overall, with Exeter winning 8 and 5 draws. The last match was a 2-0 win for Town in 2012 with goals from Boom Boom, Jamie McComb, and of course, Jordan Rhodes. Town have won the last 3 games against Exeter. So, quirky game memories, Killer. You told me something very personal off air, didn't you? That means a great deal to you. Do you want to spill it with the listeners?
This will be my my first. I'm popping my Exeter virginity this weekend. I've not seen Town play Exeter before. Obviously, I left in 2010. So there was a couple of games there that I missed afterwards. But before that, I was playing football. So I've not actually seen Town play Exeter because I'm a lot younger than you are, Matt. But I'm pretty sure you'll have been to at least one of them before that.
Steady on, a lot younger. Right. So after that shade that's overcome me, I'm going to step back out into the sun. I have a good memory. 2009, Killer, was a particularly good one. So when Huddersfield versus Exeter in home games is mentioned, I think the 2009 game is the one which stands out really. And that stands out because Jordan Rhodes scored the quickest ever Football League headed hat-trick in 8 minutes against Exeter. Lee Novak got the opener that day. And that was a particularly great day. I remember we used to sit in the FML Stadium, the FML stand, or Big Red End Lower Tier, as it's been recently called. And me and Pozza used to sit there as part of the initial Cowshed Loyal in that time. Andy and Jordan Rhodes scored from a corner right in front of us and ran right towards us, and that was quite a cool moment as he made history. But enough about history, Killer. How have Exeter City been getting on recently?
Well, Exeter now, they're in the third season back in League One. They've only had 3 managers in about 20 years. That's how successful they've been relative to Exeter. I can't believe they didn't get promoted for 6 years, man. That's quite a lean spell.
They don't do promotion to Exeter. Just looking at the history, they're not one for promotion. They're quite a solid outfit.
But in the first couple of years back in League One, they finished 14th, and then last year they finished 13th. But last year they were top of the table at the end of September, and now going into obviously this game this weekend, they're doing pretty well again. They're 6th in the league now, as you mentioned, Matt, but they've got a game in hand to catch up on. So they've got the same points as us with 19, but they have a game to play up to potentially go ahead of us. They've got with the manager that's Gary Caldwell. Gary Caldwell. He's come down from Scotland. He's been in there for quite a while. He hadn't coached as a senior coach for a while before getting the Exeter job, so it was quite surprising that he actually managed to get it, especially considering how patient Exeter are with the managers. They don't chop and change. Okay, they've had a lot of success recently, and that's probably why. But they're quite an understanding fan base, so it's quite an attractive job for somebody. Anyway, Caldwell's got it, and he's done pretty well so far. Everyone seems pretty happy with him. This season so far, they prior to the Reading game on Tuesday, which they actually lost 2-1. And to be fair, watching that game, they made a change for some reason. Caldwell went to a back four for the first time this season, I think. And he just got it wrong. The first 30 minutes were pretty awful. They found themselves 2-0 down, and just even though they changed the system and battered Reading for the rest of the game, and they just couldn't get themselves back into it. Before the Reading game, they went 5 games in a row keeping clean sheets. And now that's a record for them. I don't think it's quite a record for League One, but to go five games without conceding a goal is phenomenal, whichever division you're in. To be fair though, they've had the fixtures so far for Exeter have been a bit on the easy side. They have beaten Bolton and they've beaten Rotherham, I think, the first game of the season. But as we know, Rotherham started really poorly, and Bolton started even worse, to be honest. So they kind of had the tougher games at the right point of the season, but they've beaten all the teams they should be beating. They've done really well so far, but they haven't had Birmingham yet. They haven't had the Rex. They haven't had the hardest games yet, which they'll have to come, starting with us on Saturday. But they're a team that's getting it done. That, like I say, with 5 clean sheets and a system that's really League One. It's a League One system that we'll get into in a second, Matt, no doubt. I refer to it as more of, they don't really play a particular style other than just solid, good football, and they're hard to break down. They attack fluidly. They're going to have pace, and that's why they're doing so well in League One at the moment. But it's going to be a tough one for Town to try and unlock this weekend.
Do you want to know when my first ever Town game against Exeter was? I've looked it up.
1964 season when they got promoted. No, it can't be that, can it?
I was a little man. I was a young boy, and it was 1990. Before you were born, a couple of years before you were born, Killer. I went to Huddersfield 1, Exeter 0 in 1990, and Ife and Ura scored that day. So that was my first ever game. And the last one was last time out when we beat them 2-0. So let's hear from someone who knows a little bit more than us about Exeter City. So I got in touch with Jon Beer. John's a BBC match summariser, and he also has a podcast called My New Football Club. And Jon has kindly answered my questions very nicely.
Look, I'll be honest, if the regards as to how well City are doing at the moment, it's quite unexpected, I would say. I wouldn't say it's completely out of the blue. I think a lot of City fans were quietly optimistic at the start of the season with the squad we managed to put together and some of the signings we brought in. Do I think we'll be challenging for the top 6 at the end of the season? Probably not. I'd love us to be, I really would, but I don't think we will. I think we'll be sort of in and around mid-table like we were last season. In terms of standout players to look for, Woodsy, Ryan Woods straight away is one that stands out to me. He's been absolutely superb for us this season, and if he's ticking, we're ticking, so he'll be sort of the main person to look out for, especially for Huddersfield fans, because if he's on it, we'll be on it. We sort of line up with a traditional, well, not traditional, maybe a bit more of a modern 5-back, which sees us play with Piers Sweeney, Tristan Crammer, and John Lee Aseka as a back 3, with Niskanen as a right wing back and sort of a quite mixed left wing back at the moment. In Jack McMillan, he normally is right-sided, but he's playing on the left due to injuries in the squad. Then we sort of had two sort of deep line sixes, then 2 10s and a striker. So it's pretty common nowadays in football, I would say, to see teams line up like that. But we do sort of change depending on the strengths of the other team. So we could play, against Reading on Tuesday, we played a flat back 4. So that can chop and change depending on the opponent. But I think we'll probably more than likely see a 5 back, and we'll play sort of very expansive, very fluid, but can also go direct when needed. Football, we like to keep the ball on the ground if we can, but we have that option of going along to the likes of Josh McGuinness if needed. The last time that we played you, we did have Paul Tisdale as manager, like you said, very stylish manager, known for his style. Not quite the same as Gary though. I noticed that you've asked if he's got any quirks. He's pretty hot-headed, I would say, Gary Caldwell. He likes to make his opinions known on the sideline, and he doesn't take incorrect decisions too lightly. But, I mean, I think best dressed is a subjective opinion, but I'm not sure Gary sort of meets those same standards. And in terms of the prediction, I think it's going to be a really tight game. If we're on it and you're on it, it looks like we're both two sides that can sort of beat anyone in this division on their day. So I'll go for a 1-1. It's not very exciting, but I'll go 1-1.
There we go, Killer. So thank you very much to John for providing that, which was great. So you know what time it is, Killer? Everyone knows what time it is. It's time to get on the tactics phone, and it's time to go to the tactics board, isn't it, Killer?
Dun dun. There you go, Matt. I've got your jingle. That's the best I've got for this week. But we still need to work on it, Matt. You need some jingle for this. It's too exciting not to have one.
I need to get the bat, sort of the Batmobile kind of thing, don't I? Where it goes. I need to get that sorted. I'll get that sorted for next week. Right. So we're looking at the tactics board. If you're listening to this, do apologise, but we'll do our best to describe what we're doing, because we're a very descriptive pairing, aren't we, Killer? So let's look at Exeter first. So let's break down who we think will do pretty well. Killer, me and you have both picked out the goalkeeper, haven't we, for Exeter City? We expect Exeter, like John says, Exeter play like a 3-4-2-1 or a 3-4-1-2. I think it can be quite interchangeable, can't it? So we've got them in that kind of shape. The goalkeeper's a really interesting one. Joe Whitworth on loan from Crystal Palace. And you did some digging around in the stats there, didn't you?
Oh, he's the star man, which is quite surprising, isn't it? But anyone who keeps, again, 5 clean sheets in a row is going to be a major part of that. He's only 20. He's on loan from Crystal Palace. They think really highly of him. He's played for the England youth setups up until, I think, under 20s at this point. He's played a couple of games, I think, in the Premier League for Palace at the end of seasons. But when it comes to actually professional football, Exeter is his first kind of loan out where he's started, right? But if you look at his games that he also played in the Premier League too, obviously that's the reserve division for the Premier League clubs. He's faced, and this is a start a bit off the side, but he's faced 13 penalties, and he's actually saved over half of all the penalties he's faced. And now, if that doesn't tell you someone's a great shot stopper, I don't know what will. But he looks, having watched him a little bit through the highlights and stuff, you can see he's a young lad that still leads the team. His distribution's good, his positioning's great. He has made one error, I think, Matt, we're looking at this season, but very little for a guy that's so young coming into a team. And Exeter are fancied by many going into this year. They're expecting a tough season. They've thrown him in there, and he has done fantastically. And going throughout the team, he's not missed a minute of football yet this season. And even before breaking down, Matt, the 11 we expect to start, Exeter have 5 guys that have played every minute, or more or less every minute of every league game so far this season, which is quite a ridiculous stat as well. And that just tells you how set the team is. Quite jealous. I know. Our injury list. I thought he was wrong when I saw that initially. I'm thinking, no way, that doesn't happen, does it, in professional football? You're supposed to have 58 injuries every week, where someone else is ruled out for 8 weeks. But they've got a very consistent first 11, or they have so far this season. But it starts with their goalkeeper, Joe Whitworth. He's been a fantastic signing for him this year.
85% save percentage, so 45 saves this season. So in a rather morbid way, I'm quite looking forward to watching him this weekend, because I like to see sort of up and coming young English players. Being an England fan as well, I just hope he error that leads to a goal column just maybe goes up a notch or two this weekend. But hoping that he'll be decent. So we expect him in goal, Joe Whitworth. The back line kind of picks itself. They've got a French central defender called Tristan Kramer, who has been used FOTMob. I've been listening to Not the Top 20, and they recommended FOTMob as an app, and it is actually genuinely really good. And he's also another player who's really sort of catch the eye. Sort of sits in the middle of that back three as well, Kill. Like you say, very, very consistent. Started 10 matches this season, played 900 minutes, and he's someone who's very, very sort of solid in there. He's, as you expect, a continental centre back. He can play out from the back quite well, which is not that familiar in League One. So he's made 508 successful passes. He's got a decent long ball accuracy as well, and he's wins the majority of his duels, aerial duels as well. So he's got a good 65% ratio, a lot of ball recoveries. An interesting player we've got in the middle there. And then outside of Karama, you've got the two other centre backs who probably pick themselves. One of them is Pierce Sweeney, the Irishman. He's a little bit more experienced than the other one, and the other one is John Lee Yafiko, who plays as the left sider. So he's 21, and again, his rating this season is very good. The back three rating altogether, and the goalkeeper has been very good. And like you say, when you keep that many clean sheets, it's obviously going to be. Wing backs. So the two wing backs that are playing at the minute, Niskanen, Finnish wing back Ilmari Niskanen. John says he's been playing on the right there. FOTMob and other things have him on the left, and then the other one is Jack McMillan, who's playing at the other side. So he's actually got quite a good passing accuracy as well as Jack McMillan. So that doesn't always tell the full story, does it? He's got like 96% in the last game he played against in the last time they played wing back against Shrewsbury. But that can obviously be a bit deceptive if a lot of those are backwards, can't they? Midfield is where it gets interesting, Killer, because it's Ryan Woods who is the playmaker. And Town fans will remember Ryan Woods from going a bit Troy McClure from The Simpsons there. You'll remember him from such championship campaigns as 2014-15, etc. He's played for Brentford. He's played for Hull City. He played for Shrewsbury, and he was really good on one of the old FIFA games back in... Do you remember when the old FIFA games, you used to be able to pick up a couple of players in the lower divisions and then go on to be rated 86 if you play them enough? And he was one of them about 10 years ago. It must have been FIFA 14 or something. He was really good. Back when FIFA was decent, before it used to just be a complete license knockoff and a way to try and take money off little kids with Ultimate Team. It's an absolute bag of shit now, by the way. So Ryan Woods is the man. So really what we're looking at with Ryan Woods is David Kasumu to try and get on him and press him so that he can't play. That's going to be key to the actual game. And David Kasumu's got the tools to do that. His partner in crime is called Edward Francis, who plays in midfield. I'll be honest, Killer, I don't really know a lot about Edward Francis, 25-year-old midfielder. He's been at Exeter a year. Prior to that, he was at Gateshead. And Gateshead had a couple of decent players through. You think of Macaulay Langstaff, don't you? Jacob Chapman went on there on loan as well. So they're an up-and-coming side. Notts County, he's had a spell at Harrogate, not Northampton. Harrogate, completely different. But it looks like he's come through the Man City Academy. So, there's obviously going to be something there with him as well. So he's probably going to be comfortable on the ball coming through that system. And then it gets more interesting with the interchangeable front three, doesn't it? So any fans of local football may recognise, a sort of an attacking midfielder / striker who kind of comes in from the left or the right, mostly the left. Ex-Halifax Town player Milinik Ali. He was linked with Huddersfield a couple of years ago, but he's found himself at Exeter. He's got 7 goals in 24 games for Exeter, which is not a bad hit rate for an attacking midfielder. He's a little tricky, diminutive sort of player, and he's doing well for them. He's Millie Ali. And then his partners in crime there. There's a lot of partners in crime today. You've got Sonny Cox, who's the striker who tends to play up front, another young player, and then Cammy Doyle, 19. So there's a lot of youth in this Exeter team, and they're obviously a club, aren't they, Exeter, who do look to their youth system quite a lot, and they do have a really good youth system. I mentioned to John about Paul Tisdale. The last time we played them, Paul Tisdale was the manager, and he had that deerstalker hat on. Some people may remember with his Paul Smith deerstalker hat. I think he was friends with someone at Paul Smith or something, and he used to just dress in their clobber all the time. And they've pretty much been bringing through young players from the academy ever since. You think of Ollie Watkins, don't you? Ampadu, who's unfortunately his career's nosedive in the last year or so. You think of like these players that have come through from there, and Pym, the goalkeeper, was really highly rated at one point, and Exeter really punch above their weight. I know it's out of the way, isn't it, Exeter? So they're not quite on the doorstep of some clubs like we are, where we've got Man United, we've got Man City, Sheffield Wednesday, Liverpool, all within that sort of corridor, which allows them to pick off the local lads. But they are slightly tucked away, but they do really well considering the size of the club. And there's a lot of exciting young players who could take a next leap. But that's the way we see them sort of setting up. Killer, any advances maybe on that one?
No, just that the back five that they play is very, very structured. But then the front five is very fluid. So when they attack going forward, they have Duff referred to it today in his press conference. They've got two very different formations. And obviously, considering how many goals they don't concede, defensively, the formation is strong. And it'll be a team that's tough for anybody to break down. But when in transition then, the front five guys go all over. They don't stick just to the left-hand side or to the right-hand side. They go everywhere. To be fair, the wing-backs actually against Reading did much better. Niskanen, I think it is, on the left-hand side. He scored his first goal for the club. He was there all last year. I think they signed him from Dundee. And funnily enough, Jack McMillan, who plays on the other side, he was also from Scotland. So both wing-backs are from Caldwell's time up in Scotland. But they've kind of got it together a little bit. And Niskanen especially, I can't, honestly, having watched the game back against Reading on Tuesday, it's unbelievable. He could have scored a hat-trick, and he'd never scored for them before. But that's the way Exeter play, in that if Caldwell sees a weakness or a way to take advantage, he'll swap his formation to allow that guy, whoever it is, even if it's Niskanen, 44 games into his Exeter career, never scored before, he's the free man. So the attacks will be going down his side to try and get him on it if it's working against them. That's kind of the fluidity they have in possession when they're going forward. But out of possession, you ain't going to be getting easy, cheap goals off them. Reading scored after a minute, and that really messed up the game plan. But other than that, they don't make many mistakes. Town have to be solid and have to be ready for them, because Exeter will be a very, very tough team to break down, and it's all based upon that back five.
I've just moved them slightly on the tactics board, and you probably see it's almost like, do you remember the old WM formations from about 100 years ago? That seems to have come back around a little bit now, and they kind of miss a big gap in midfield. And Brighton, Hazela at Brighton is a real sort of advocate of playing that way. What they do is they compact the defence so they can play out quite well. And then there's this huge gap in midfield where if anybody comes into it, they just play over the top, and then they've got an overload up front with sort of 5 attackers against usually 4 defenders or 3 in Town's case, which is interesting. So that's enough about Exeter. So let's think about how Town may line up for this one. And I think what Town are getting at the minute is a bit of consistency, and that comes with trying to keep the lineup pretty much the same as well. And I think despite playing Saturday, Tuesday at the minute, I think Michael Duffy is going to try and do that as well for me. Killer. Jacob Chapman keeps his place. He made a really good save, didn't he, against Wrexham?
Yeah, he did.
I think 1 or 2 people I saw online, 1 or 2 sort of questioned the goal he conceded against Bristol Rovers, but he more than made up for it. And I did say this at the time, I think in the group or on the podcast, that I don't mind him doing that against Bristol Rovers 3-0 up, as long as he doesn't do it against Wrexham when it's 0-0. And when it was 0-0 against Wrexham, he pulled off a great save, didn't he? That was going into the bottom corner. So for me, Jacob Chapman keeps his place. I really like him on the ball, and I really like him as a character. He seems such a really well-grounded, nice kid. Maybe it's because he comes from Australia, Killer. Maybe it's that sort of twang in him. But really, really good kid. And he's got this really sort of, I mentioned it before, he's got this really relaxed personality, which I think helps the defenders to be relaxed and comfortable with him as well. If you're kind of scatty and you're a little bit all over the place, I think it unnerves defenders. But Jacob Chapman's got this really sort of calm exterior, and I think it really helps in defence. And he's done well again, and he keeps his place. I'd keep the back 3 as it is, me, Killer, because they've played well together the last couple of games, and I don't think it's necessary to change that. I know they've probably got a little bit more pace of Exeter, so I can see the temptation to maybe put Brodie back in that 3. But for me, I think he goes with Nigel Landwyk left side. Tom Lee's still in the middle. Tom Lee's has had 2 good games. He's struggled a little bit at points this season playing right-sided. And then he played in the middle, didn't he? One game in the middle, which I can't remember if that was that Reading away, and he struggled. But he's had a spell out of the side. He's come back in, and it's like the Tom Lees we know and love, isn't it? The solid, dependable one in the middle. So for me, he stays. Matty Pearson has been outstanding these last 3 or 4 weeks. Absolutely outstanding. So for me, that back three picks itself, Killer, at the minute.
Yeah, it does, and it's surprising to me because we spoke about it before. I thought Lee's going back in there as a central guy instead of Pearson, who had been, up until that point, the best centre-back, in that central centre-back we'd had all season. Was a silly thing to do because we'd seen Lee's there all the time. But I honestly believe with David Kasumu playing as that holding midfielder, he's just covering that little space, that little dead space behind the wing-backs really, really well, and just offering a little bit more support to our centre-backs, because that's the only thing that's really changed, Matt. It was a real weakness for us for such a long time in this season. We've not really changed the centre-back positions other than bringing Pearson in. But when he played there before, like against Walsall in the Cup and in pre-season, it looked awful. But the protection, I think, given by Kasumu, was just made Lees, Pearson and Lonvite work really, really well. And we don't look like that easy out ball of the wing-backs' heads is going to kill us at the moment. Whereas there were, 7-8 games where every single time it was like, oh, no, not again. It just, that's gone. It's totally gone. So you have to stick with that back three that's working, because they did a really good job against a very well-drilled Wrexham side on Tuesday night.
Absolutely. Wing backs for me, Mikael Miller. He's on a good run as well. I've enjoyed Mikael Miller last couple of games. Even the end product starting to come as well against Bristol Rovers. There's some good end product there, creating 4 chances. For me, he stays. Right wing back, I am tempted to make the only change, Killer, and the reason I would do that is I think Ollie Turton's done all right. When he's come in, he's been front-footed. I think that the tendency with Ollie Turton tends to be that a back three becomes a back five, and he gets pushed back quite quickly. But he's been really front-footed and attacking these last 2 games. Even against Wrexham, he tried to play forward. He does hit the odd good cross, does Ollie Turton, but he doesn't have that sort of pace in transition and that sort of forward-thinking nature that Lasse Sorensen does, for example. And Lasse Sorensen, unfortunately, is going to be out. Every time we get an injury now, it's the magic thing is 8 weeks, isn't it? So it's soul destroying the amount of injuries that we're getting. But when you've got someone like Ollie Turton that you can bring on, or Brodie Spencer at that sort of wing back, you've got some really good options, and we do have a strong squad. So we shouldn't fear injuries as much in this league as what we did in the Championship, where one injury could bring the whole house of cards down in that level, because we weren't as strong as some of the others. But for me, I would be tempted to throw Brodie Spencer in because of the pace of Ali and Niskanen on that side. So I think Brodie's recovery pace is a little bit better. Ollie, obviously, as 31-year-old right back. But for me, Brodie just offers a little bit more in the transition going forward, and the pace, the recovery pace. I wouldn't argue either way, whoever starts. If Turton started out, it would not bother me whatsoever. I just think Brodie just offers a little bit extra in terms of that pace. That's all. You look like you were going to disagree.
Yeah, I'm just surprised. I was actually surprised it wasn't Spencer starting against Wrexham, because in the press conference before, Duff was saying, well, he's an international and Turton's here and he's done all right. But I thought Spencer would have been starting then. So actually for Turton to get the nod on Tuesday was quite surprising. And now for me, Matt, that first half was a defensive slog, but we kept it clean. We got out of it without conceding. I wouldn't be changing anything in the back line. Just because of that, I think sometimes you have to reward guys. If Turton doesn't get the nod to start on Saturday, I think it's just a bit of a knock on him, really, personally. And if it was me playing in that position and I'd come in after a while out and done as well as that and gone to a team that won every single home game before we've gone there and taken a point and kept a clean sheet, I'd be quite upset. So I'd be going with Turton for maybe personnel management rather than tactical management, if that makes any sense.
It does. I mean, you're right. You've got to reward players who play well, but you've also got to pick your strongest side. And like I say, when I turn up, I'm not going to be disappointed if Turton or Brodie are right wing back. I'm going to be quite relatively at ease with either at the minute. Midfield, I think he's going to go with the 2 again. The flat 2, and again, I don't see him changing it from Kasumu and Kasumu and Kane. I'd like Hodge to be free, but he's way through his standard 8-week out, isn't he? That everyone seems to get at some point. So it's going to be Herbie Kane and David Kasumu, I think, in that midfield, and then just ahead of him, Ben Wiles is playing well at the minute. He's I thought he played okay against Wrexham. I thought he did some frustrating things when he was moved to sort of the left of the three when we changed, because basically he Duff sort of inverted it the second half, didn't he, and went back to the 6 and 2/8, which wasn't working early in the season, but it actually worked really well against Wrexham and it forced them back. Ben Wiles was then given the task of going down, pulling wide on the left and going down the left, but I didn't find he was quite as strong doing that as what he has been through the middle. But I do think he'll start with that solid base of a 2 sitting, and then Ben Wiles ahead of them. And if it doesn't work, then he can change it. And it's good to see that we've actually got that option of change as well, because Evans would be on the bench for me, and he's obviously champing at the bit at the minute, and it is champing for anyone that's listening. I hear too much chomping at the bit these days. And then up front is intriguing because Marshall and Radulovic have played quite a fair amount of minutes recently. Marshall had a little dip against Wrexham, but I think part of that was because of that midfield, and the midfield couldn't support him, and he was drowned out a little bit by Wrexham's back three. So I don't think it was necessarily him at fault, as opposed to the starting system, which wasn't quite working. Radulovic did okay as well against Wrexham. I thought he could have maybe scored with that header at that right at the end of the first half. I think when he watches that back, I think from that exact same position in Finland, and I think he might be slightly disappointed he didn't at least put it on target. But he's getting in position now, and he's starting to be on the end of chances, which is another positive. I think Radulovic stays, and I think Marshall might get another nod as well. I think they might work on that. But Danny Ward actually came on and played quite well. And when you talk about rewarding players, there's an argument that Danny Ward might be thrown in, but I think it might take more than 45 minutes or a decent 45 minutes to sort of dislodge that partnership from there. And Reece Healy's obviously back as well. So Reece Healy's not going to be fit to start, but again, there's options now, Killer. There's Ward and Healy going to be on the bench possibly. So if those two don't start, don't click, then Town have got options again. So that's the way we see Town lining up. I don't think you've got any changes with the front two, Killer.
I actually think if there is a change, it wouldn't be Marshall anyway. It'd be Radulovic dropping out for Danny Ward. I think that's, for me, the only option there for Duff to go with, because I thought Ward was really, really good, and I still think a motivated Ward, a fit Ward, is a starting striker for any team in this division apart from Birmingham. And Radulovic, he's been getting chances and he's scored, and he's pretty fragile emotionally. Well, emotional, that's probably not a fair way to explain it, but you know what I mean. He looks like he needs a bit more confidence from scoring, so taking him out could ruin that. But I thought Danny Ward were really, really good. You can't drop Marshall because he, up until Tuesday night, has been the best striker, as we've all been celebrating for the last few games. So I do think that's one to watch, but I'd be quite surprised if it did happen. But maybe Ward for Bojan is something that could potentially happen on Saturday. That's all.
Okay. Right, that's it. So that is how we see the game going, or the teams lining up, Killer. What about a prediction from you? Shall I go first on this one, or do you want to go first?
No, you go first, Matt. Go.
I think this is going to be a really tough game, and I think the first goal is going to be big in this one. I think if we score first, I think we win the game 2-0, 2-1. If Exeter score, it's going to be much difficult because they'll be able to sit in and dig in and maybe grind out either a win or a draw, I think. So the first goal's big, but I'm gonna go with Town, and I'm gonna go with 2-1, Killer, to Huddersfield this weekend.
Okay, yeah, I think it's going to be tight as well. I think they're so good in defence that it's not going to be a game with the gluttonous amount of chances. But I think Town will win it, and I think it'll be a 1-0 win. I think our defence is much better, and I think we look so much better and in control of games because of how strong the defence has suddenly become. I have 1-0 Town, and I have Ben Wiles scoring again. I think a nice run down the wing by somebody to pull it back for Wiles to smash one in from 18 yards, personally. So I'll go with a 1-0 Town win.
I'm going to go with Kane and Marshall to score this week. Right, that's it for predictions. Killer, do you want to go around the grounds? So usually what we do is we usually have a little bit of a roundup, don't we? And have a look at what's happening in and around the Football League. Well, just not really the Football League, but League One this coming weekend. And we shall take a look at our home for hopefully 12 months. But the Saturday offers a nice feast of League One football, Killer. So we've got, how many games we got here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So practically everyone's playing on Saturday, apart from Blackpool and Wigan, who are playing on Monday evening. That's a Monday night football with a difference, isn't it? Blackpool versus Wigan in League One. I doubt Gary Neville and Jamie Carragher are going to break that down afterwards. I would love it if they did, but I think they probably think they're a bit too big for that. The first game this weekend is an interesting one. It's Mansfield versus Birmingham City. Birmingham got caught a little bit, didn't they? Last time out away from home, was it at Charlton, wasn't it, where they lost? I think that's quite an interesting one. Is that Mansfield have really pushed on lately, and they've looked quite a dangerous outfit, haven't they? And they're fourth in the league as it stands at the minute. And a Birmingham win would pretty much have Birmingham running away at the top of the league at this point, which everyone expected anyway. But if Town could sneak a win and Mansfield don't, then it just brings Town closer to that top few again, which would be ideal. I think Mansfield have done really well recently, but I think Birmingham might tip up there and win that one. That's an interesting one. Reading have been good recently as well. Reading against Bristol Rovers. Reading are just sitting just outside the playoffs at the minute. If we fail to beat Exeter on Saturday, Reading could overtake us, which is surprising because Reading, I think when we played them, were about 10 places lower, weren't they? So they've come up recently. That's a really interesting one to watch. Bolton versus Peterborough, again, that's interesting as well because Bolton, you just wonder how strong mentally Bolton are because I know they only lost to Birmingham last time out, and a lot of teams will lose to Birmingham this season. They were just on the cusp of getting back into the playoff race or the top six. They're still in the race, but they were just on the cusp of getting back into the top six, and then that defeat's just pushed them back into the bottom half. And it's so tight, Killer. Town sitting fifth on 19 points, and then all the way down to 15th, Bristol Rovers are on 16 points. So that's a lot of clubs there that can be in and out of the playoff picture this week, and that's why it's so interesting. And then we've obviously got Charlton versus Wrexham, which again, Charlton had that bad run similar to ourselves, and they're starting to recover now. They're in 11th. That's going to be interesting. And I thought Wrexham were exactly as we expected on Tuesday night, and I just don't see. This is going to really come back and haunt me, but I just don't see the individual quality for Wrexham on the pitch for them to stay where they are at the moment.
Yep.
I think in terms of organisation, fitness, and everything else, fantastic. And that feel-good factor as well carries so much. And honestly, it gets you so far in League One, does that. But you also need a bit more quality sometimes on the pitch. And I just don't quite see, apart from Elliot Lee, Wrexham having that. Maybe when Paul Mullen gets back fit. So that's going to be interesting for me because I think one or two defeats on the spin and Wrexham could just fall a little bit. But they've obviously got that spirit. Lincoln, Stockport, two teams who were in the top six and have fallen out. Again, really good fixture. Again, it's really good, this one. Northampton, Crawley is an interesting one. Rotherham, Stevenage. Rotherham are really struggling. And Stevenage do not concede goals, so that's going to be a really awkward one. And Stevenage are going to really want to do Rotherham over because of the Steve Evans factor as well. So that is going to be an interesting one. You got Shrewsbury against Barnsley. Barnsley were the worst team we played. You know, whenever Town win, it's always because the opposition. I'm calling Kosmala out here. It's always like, oh, the opposition were rubbish. Town aren't that good. And they said Barnsley were the worst team that we played this season, and maybe they were on the day. But since then, Barnsley have been winning games, and I think they drew last time out, but they've recovered. So it's really fascinating. And the last game for the Saturdays, Wickham and Leyton Orient. And Wickham are flying. And they've also got some really good young players. And Wickham are a real dark horse for the top six at the start of the season. And they're always kind of there or thereabouts, well run. They know how to sort of finish high in League One, don't they? And even without Gareth Ainsworth pulling the strings these days, they're still a decent outfit. The Lancastrian derby for Monday Night Football with Jamie Carragher and Gary Neville breaking that down with Blackpool and Wigan. And I don't like to blow my own trumpet too much, Killer, but I do remember when we played Blackpool and they played us off the park, there were a couple of people saying how good Blackpool were and they'll finish second. And I said, look, they'll do well for 6 weeks, then they'll do rubbish for 6 weeks. They'll do well for 6 weeks, they'll do rubbish for 6 weeks. They'll be up and down and all over the place. And that's what's happening with them at the minute. But they could hit another spell. So they're going to be one of those teams, Blackpool. And Wigan are just incredibly tight out there at the back, don't concede a lot. Good goalkeeper. But for me, I think it's a really interesting week in League One. I'm going to quite look forward to this, Killer.
It's a cracker, isn't it? Honestly, all the games are really tight. There is actually a game, I don't know if you mentioned it. It's Cambridge United versus Burton. And now, before, if you'd have asked this a couple of weeks ago, it was the battle of the two worst teams potentially in League One history. They were awful. They both started awfully for different reasons. But Cambridge have actually managed to win 2 games in a row.
Kachunga on fire. Kachunga's on
yeah,
fire, mate.
That's where I was going with
Ain't
it.
nobody.
Whereas Burton have lost now 5 in a row. Looking at the form guide, and it might be more. I haven't got it on my screen just at the moment to see how far back this run of defeats goes. But Cambridge are now second bottom, playing bottom Burton, and a chance to move further up the ladder and get closer to safety. Obviously, it's very early to talk about it like that. But it's just this division, Matt. I know we disagree on the quality of it, but you can't argue entertainment's not there because every single game this weekend, bar maybe Northampton and Crawley, that's probably the least exciting game of the lot. But I'm with you, Matt. It's Wickham out of absolutely nowhere. I didn't fancy him when we did our pre-season preview to going into League One. I didn't really have them up there. I kind of just thought, nah, they'll be okay. They're not going to get relegated. Of course not. But they didn't really have anyone that stood out. But they've won 4 of the last 5. They're only a point behind Wrexham, but have a game in hand. They're 5 points behind Birmingham. And when you're a quarter away through the season, certain teams like Exeter may have had softer fixtures, but it's not the case for everybody. And they are contenders. So to see how they can just keep going this weekend is what I'll also be looking at. Leyton Orient, not necessarily the greatest team at the moment, are they? But again, Wickham, they're getting it done, and they're really a player at the top I didn't really expect to be there.
They've got a winger of Wickham, and his first name is Beryl, and it's just a classic old dinner lady name. It's an absolute classic. But yeah, they do look interesting to Wickham. I were having a look at them last week, and they've got a number of players that aren't exactly household names, but they have quite a style, don't they? Wickham, they like strong running physical players, don't they? But they don't necessarily play long ball or anything. They just know how to mix it up, don't they? And know how to get the best out of what they've got. So I was having a look, and especially when they beat Peterborough, that was a beating Peterborough 3-1 at home's a decent result. And in that game, they had 18 shots, 8 on target. Obviously, Peterborough had the vast majority, a slight majority of possession. And it's Richard Coney who's the player that kind of sticks out at the minute for Wickham, and he's interesting. They've got Josh Scowen in midfield as well, and I had a look and noticed they've got Morley, who sits at number 6. And now he was really good for Bolton when they were coming up from League 2, and the first couple of campaigns for them that he just sort of fell out of the team last year. But I remember watching him and messaging Chris at Bolton and saying he's really decent, him, and he's interesting number 6, and he's ended up now at Wickham, and I think that's a really, really interesting player to have sort of sat there. And Richard Coney's 21 years old. He's an Ivory Coast from the Ivory Coast, and he's ending up playing at Wickham, and he's doing pretty well. So they're an interesting team for me, mate. Wickham. Coney's got 8 goals in 16 games this season, so he's flying at the minute. So maybe one to keep an eye on in January. Maybe 21 years old. Some people might be having a sniff. But speaking of sniff, we never mentioned Freddie Ladapo, did we? Either in the team, he's found himself out, but I'm sure he'll be back at some point. The old sniffer. Killer, that's it from me. Anything that you'd like to add, or shall we call it? These previews are starting to get longer, aren't they? I remember I used to say to Brady, Brady, you need to keep those previews shorter, and they used to get gradually a little bit longer, and we're doing the same thing now. So sorry, Brady, it's habit, isn't it? Habit of over talking, but I think that's
you're becoming the thing, Matt. You're becoming the thing you hate. That's where
I don't hate Brady. Brady's a good guy. Bit of a douchebag, but he's a good guy. Nah, he's sound. Right, I think that's it. Thanks for everybody for listening. Join Jay and Joel for the post-match recovery show. Again, it's all about fan reaction. Is that show? So we do need your reaction to make a show. Otherwise, it just ends up being another podcast. So I'll make sure that they advertise it in time. But go and join them. Get something off your chest and have a chat with them, because they're a good pair. And that's it. And we'll be back possibly Monday, Tuesday night with the review show, looking at how the game's gone. Hopefully, it's going to be a win for Town.
There's a team that is dear to its followers. The colours are bright blue and white. They're a team of renown, and they're the pride of the town. And the game of football is their delight. And all the while upon the field of play, thousands loudly cheer them on the way. Often you can hear them say, who can beat the town today? And then the bells will ring so merrily, and every goal shall be a memory. So town, play up and bring that cup back to Huddersfield. So town, play up and bring the cup back to Huddersfield.